Welcome back to another episode of Owning the Weight podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Tedesco, and joining me today is Abby and Sid. And on this podcast, we'll talk all things wellness, nutrition, and business. And today, we're going to be talking about the topic of grace and how that fits in the workplace. So I think, too, Sydney and I always kind of talk about grace is something I think really just stems from our faith and what we've learned in our personal lives with our relationship with God, and how can we extend that onto the employees and people we come into contact at work, and how do you balance giving grace and holding accountability?
Yeah, I think that's really important. This topic actually came about in coaching managers. And so if you're a manager listening to this episode, you're probably going to find a lot of value from this, because there is a really tricky line between giving someone chances. Maybe you've heard that word before, chances, and giving someone grace versus holding high standards. And those two things absolutely live in the same realm together. And actually, as we were driving over here, Abby so kindly picked me up and got me some coffee before making it over here so that I was prepared. But on our way over here, I was telling Abby, like, grace upon grace is tattooed on my body. She was like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's literally tattooed on my body.
I had no idea.
I don't think I knew that either.
Yeah, it's been such an important philosophy for me in my life, because as you both know, and from the podcast, if you guys have listened to like past management series episodes, shout out, that series is awesome if you haven't. I have really high standards, and I hold really high standards for myself and for others around me. And that is a really slippery slope of expectation that will never be met if you don't have grace. And the first time I ever really started studying grace was actually after a sermon. My pastor said the phrase heart position, which you hear me say a lot now. It's all about your heart position. And we were actually talking about the traditions in the Old Testament and how those are not really applicable in the modern world, and why that is. Obviously, it is because Jesus came, and now Jesus is the tradition. Like, all you have to do is believe in him and confess with your tongue that he is your Lord and Savior, and believe in your heart of hearts that he is, and therefore your sins are forgiven, right? And so then we go to heart position. So if you're, let's say you curse and your heart position was to be funny, you made a mistake, because yes, your words matter, and we curse around here. Just so you know, we're imperfect. It's not that it's the right thing to do. It's just that your heart position wasn't to be cruel, and it's important to denote the difference between those two things. So yeah, anyway, this came up because this topic came up because I was trying to help a manager understand that rules are black and white when they are written in a handbook or in a guideline or a standard. But actually, the application of those rules is so gray, and that gray is defined by grace.
And I think about, like, if you're in a growing business, which we've been in since the day we started, so you're constantly just kind of figuring it out as you go. And so giving people that runway to kind of go for it, you're kind of encouraging them to go, and nobody is going to do it right all the time or always have a win. So they have to and giving people that confidence to try, mess up, and show them grace is kind of how I think about it, is like, I want people to take the chance and go. And a lot of times for them, it's challenging. So if they know I'm going to fall on some grace, if this isn't perfect, it's super encouraging.
Yeah. Actually, before we even get into examples of it, what is grace?
Grace, it's the forgiveness. I think of forgiveness and just giving someone a pass for the mess up, or like you said, the heart position, such a great way to think about it, is like knowing that they weren't the intent of it wasn't in a bad way or intended in a wrong way. They didn't do it on purpose. And so you give them grace. You show them grace and forgiveness, and you let them kind of stumble through it. And hopefully they course correct and they learn from that mistake or that fall or whatever.
Yeah. In business, I think mistake makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it's easy to make a mistake in business and then for someone to have to give grace. But I was actually reading, I'm obsessed with Jim Collins right now. He's if you've never heard of Jim Collins' books, I'm totally obsessed. He has quite a few of them: Good to Great, Built to Last, Be 2.0. Those are the three that I'm focused on right now. And in Built to Last, he's talking a lot about purpose and core values and vision and all that. But he says something, and this is paraphrasing, that basically says when you have the right team members working along the right path who are visionary and forward thinking, you do give them a pass when they mess up without malintention. But the moment that they mess up with malintention, bye. Peace.
I think you know the difference. I mean,
one of them is grace and one of them is accountability.
Yeah.
Being an employee of Fit Flavors, like I feel like Fit Flavors has done a really great job of balancing the two. And like really creating a space, because one of our core values is to innovate. And so like Fit Flavors is creating a space that like we're able to innovate, but also like knowing we're human and we're gonna mess up. But you guys have been great with outpouring grace.
Thanks.
Too. At least me whenever I mess up. So
which isn't very frequent.
Not very frequently, but Abby did just happen.
I did just happen to have a big oopsie.
Let's tell us about this. Tell us about this.
Oh, on the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. So recently I made an oopsie. We got, what is it like professionally called? Like fishing?
Fishing, I think,
Fishing. Yeah, there was a fishing attempt and I moderate.
I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Now I remember.
She gave so much grace she forgot.
Yeah. Thank the Lord. But I oversee Jillian's inbox, and whenever like invoices come into her inbox, I take care of those invoices. And there was one that came in and it was,
from Best Buy.
From Best Buy. Yeah.
Except it wasn't Best Buy.
Yeah. Newsflash. It wasn't Best Buy. And I went ahead and I got on the phone with these people. Long story short, her computer, her laptop, the CEO's laptop got hacked. And so, yeah, that was kind of a big deal in my eyes. So I had to take it up to Geek Squad and I was like, get everything off that they got on there. And it was kind of a whole thing.
I came into the office that day and Abby like walked right in the door and just looked at me square in the eyes and said, can we talk? And like, usually when Abby needs to talk, it's like, hey, we have this 17,000 schedule long thing. Help me figure out what I can take on or off this plate or da. And instead Abby just burst into tears. And I've never seen Abby cry like a day in my life. She is the most put together human being and like has such high like logic and is all the things that you can think of like a mother would need to be in like a horrible circumstance. And this woman is standing in front of me crying. And I'm like, oh, it's just the computer got hacked. Whatever. Like, it's cool.
Well, no, I looked at Sid and I looked at Sid and Elizabeth, who's our HR girl. And I go, I fucked up. And Sid's like, what?
Oh no.
What could have happened? And then I told her and she was like, oh, that's it?
I was trying not to laugh because you were crying, but like it was quite comical. Yeah, it was quite comical. So like Grace in that moment, obviously clicking phishing emails. And also too, just to give some background, we've been getting phishing emails in general. And so we have been talking about it as a business and we've been setting the expectation of not clicking into emails and And so in Abby's mind, she did the exact thing that we have been coaching people to not do, which felt like a major mess up because it is something that we've been holding accountability around. But upon clicking it, and like a phishing email is such a good example because no one wants to be phished. No one is like working for a business thinking, I'm going to click this email. I'm going to get hacked and I'm going to cost the business money. Like, no one is thinking that. So it's a good example. And then she did the thing that was against the rules, against the accountability measures and, was upset because it's an upsetting thing. But ultimately the response was like, okay, well, like, let's just figure out how to fix this. What's our next step? What's the next step? How does Jillian get a computer in the interim? She was leaving for a trip. And within an hour, the whole problem was solved. And the only person left wondering was like Abby resolving with her own self because all the rest of us had just applying grace was so immediate.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a thought, right?
So how do you guys feel like you balance extending grace in the workplace, but also maintaining high expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the first thing I thought was like, if you mess up on something you can't mess up on, like I had an employee years ago. I loved this employee, like truly, I did. They always weren't the best at like doing things the right way. They were very laxed, and one day they made a decision to let something slide in their department that ended up costing the business all of our meals and cost us a lot of money, and we lost a lot of product. And for that, I had to let them go. And that was a time that, I remember sitting down at the table with them and I let them go. And I told them how much I wish them the best. And they thanked me for the job here and they understood and they took ownership. But that was just like, sorry, I can't like let this go. Like that cost the business thousands of dollars. And that was very bad mistake that you made. And as in the position that they were in, they shouldn't have been making a mistake like that. So that was very black and white for me.
Yeah, you just said the thing, black and white. That was literally what was going through my head. I actually think, and just so
it was like, do not do this thing, and they let an employee do this thing, and so it cost the business a lot of money.
Black and white. So the I think that to answer your question directly, Abby, the answer is it is black and white, and I want to get to that in 1 second. And I think if anyone doesn't know in this podcast, me and Jillian, we love each other. Like, so I feel very open to say anything. I think that Jillian's actually been in the past really bad at this. And like really, really bad at this. And we've talked about it a ton.
Bad at what?
At knowing the difference between grace and accountability in business. And here's the reason. She just said it was black and white, and grace and accountability are black and white. There is a line that has to be drawn in the sand. And I
probably used to give too much grace.
So what Jillian had was 2 lines. If you think about a line in the sand and literally it's black and white, so black above the line, let's say white below the line, and it is crystal clear when you're on one side of the sand.
I had a lot of gray.
She had a lot of gray. So there were 2 lines in the sand for Jillian. The lower line was the love line.
Yeah.
The love line. And grace and love are often words that are combined together. And in other facets of your life, there are 2 lines. In your marriage, there is a love line. I know multiple marriages, and I hate that I know this, but it's just the truth. I know of multiple marriages, mostly from my childhood friends, who one of the spouses cheated on each other, and they're still married, happily married, and worked through that. That's the love line. There's not a love line in business.
Yeah.
You waste thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of product because you made one very obvious rule-breaking error. That does not need grace. Now, I think the conversation you had for that employee, for example, was like you said, you sat and told him that that you loved them and that you had a great relationship, wish the best for them. And I think that is grace. That is how you apply grace and accountability. But you don't have gray in business. It is black and white. And I think we really lean on Art a lot. Art is one of our business advisors. And I love Art because he's black and white. And Jillian loves Art because he is black and white. And he handles my black and whiteness and her grayness so well and always gets us on the same page. If we're not on the same page, we can usually do it ourselves too. But Art just like hurries it along.
He does. He's a man of few words.
It's great. And I think that he is a great representation of black and white in business. And what is it that he always says, Jillian,
he says, I need a little bit of more of her and she needs a little bit more.
Well, no, not that. I was gonna, that's true. But I was going to say the part about always being loving, gentle, and kind.
Oh, yeah.
And anytime
he ends every conversation with, you always have to be loving, gentle, and kind, but hold people accountable.
Yeah. And I think that the words loving, gentle, and kind, just like, honestly, every time I look at Abby, I'm like, mom. Abby is like the mom of of 3 kids, and then also of anyone around her at any moment. I feel like mothers know this best, actually, because when your kid does something off the rails, you don't want them to do that again, but you don't want to go like, blah, you can't do this. You want to calmly explain to them why this is not the action that they should take. And
I've been having a lot of those conversations with my boys lately. And I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to like me when I tell you can't do this. But if I don't teach you, you're going to grow up and you're going to think that doing this is okay and it's not okay. And I'm not going to tolerate it here. And when you're older, you're going to thank me.
Yeah. That's the black and whiteness of grace. So this is a
I'm
long-winded
probably
answer,
actually pretty strict with them if I'm being honest. Probably because it's all on me. Well, me and Jason, but like
there's no one else. There's
no
managers to help you.
Yeah,
it's you and Jason.
Yeah. And I'm like, those are my children. Like they need to be respectful. Like I'm like, did they say thank you? Did they say please? Were they kind to you? You know, like.
Yes, you're definitely way more like you. Obviously, you and Jason are very good about getting the boys to be mature and understanding things. But like as an outsider, your kids are very, very respectful.
As an insider, your kids are very, very respectful.
Okay.
Yeah, as an insider, there you go. It's like, yeah.
They're great boys.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I think it's about knowing that giving grace in business is not gray. It is still black and white. If you lie, cheat, steal, break a handbook policy, or don't perform in your job
Or just completely disrespectful.
or are just,
or being malicious.
Exactly. Those things are not, we have to draw a line of accountability, but we can do it with giving grace. So an example is the fishing thing. Yes, we have been telling people not to fish. If there was a line in the handbook that said, if you fish, you may have disciplinary action, then, or if you fall victim to fishing, you may have disciplinary action, then that would be the business saying, this is our line in the sand. Your handbook is the line in the sand. Your standards and operating procedures are the line in the sand. We don't need to standardize not clicking phishing emails.
So what about grace and performance? You know, obviously you're talking about breaking rules and stuff. What about like someone you love who's great, but they're a low performer?
So someone you love who is great, but they are a low performer. I think first, this is sort of where the gray area comes for you. Like, I think you should love people. Like, I love people because I love Jesus and Jesus says love people. But I don't think first, oh, I love Abby and she's not performing. That's just not my angle. I think that makes grace very hard because at home there is a gray zone. And maybe sometimes in business there could be too, but like the love creates you. That's the love line again. I don't think that really exists.
I like that, the love line.
The love line.
You could just look at me now and be like, you're crossing the love line.
You're crossing the love line. Yeah. And again, too, like podcast listeners, I don't want to be so black and white that there's not any circumstances. Like obviously if you work with your spouse, like that's always going to be complicated. If you're, there's all kind of caveats, but generally speaking, the way when performance starts to slip, you communicate it then. You don't wait for it to pile up in your head. I was actually on a call with a manager today, and I was telling them, hey, you need to read The 1 Minute Manager. And it's actually a book, Jillian, that you recommended me to, and I love it.
My mom recommended that to me.
It's great. Oh. Thanks, Mama Mary. It's a really, really great book, and it teaches you just to like coach in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that so long as you're teaching your managers to coach in the moment and you are coaching your managers in the moment, it's
less of like an ordeal.
Yeah.
Like it's like having a conversation in passing, like, oh, hey, I saw you just did this. Like, it's just done this way.
Yeah.
Or, hey, next time you do this, can you try to do it this way? This is actually the way that we would prefer you to do it.
Exactly. And it becomes, whenever you don't just hit it nail on the head, that's when it starts to fester in your brain and become something that it's not. For example.
Or then you start, which I've in the past, dread having this conversation because there's so much to deliver. It feels like now it's coming out of nowhere and
the build up.
You're resentful when really like they don't even know.
So the piece of feedback that I got from the managers, so something happened and I told two of our managers, hey, next time this happens, like you came to me with this information, but next time this happens, you ought to just tell that person right then and there, because now you're having time to like sit and think about it and they don't know the feedback and all of those things. And so I think that the biggest lesson in that though is how to deliver it. That's what they asked. They were like, well, Sid, you're so great with words, but I am not in the moment. How do I do that? And I think that you give a formula to give 1 minute coaching, and that is communicate your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you go like, ooh, I can't believe that person did that. Immediately, they did not meet an expectation in your brain. What's the expectation? You can usually tell me immediately what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you can articulate the expectation, all you have to say is, hey, Abby, I expected you to not click on phishing emails. Just as a quick reminder, like whenever you just be careful with phishing emails, that's my expectation. Boom. Now Abby knows, oh shoot, if I do this again, I might not be given grace, right? Bad example, likely that's not you. Again, it's like heart position and malintent, but in situations where it's performance, where it's like, hey, you didn't close the retail store properly, or you, that the way you spoke to that other manager was disrespectful or skirting the lines of disrespect or in the gray, like just having that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you can hold grace and accountability, because it doesn't build up. You're just spitting it off as it happens, and you're building and coaching as you go. That in and of itself is grace giving, instead of having a disciplinary form and you're just coaching them in the moment.
Yeah, I think some people could probably argue that like, oh, if I just keep giving grace, I'm like being complacent with people or their performance or whatever, and that's going overboard.
I actually want to talk about this. I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is in alignment with if you're a new manager or if you're a seasoned manager, you've probably felt this way before. Someone messes up they cross the line, not the love line, the real line. They cross the line and you go, oh, but I didn't communicate to them the expectations clearly. And but it's 2 days later and that, now it's like blown over, or I could have done better. And you have this shame cycle going as a manager. You can learn from any lesson. Someone crossing a line is a lesson that everyone around can learn from, but you cannot control someone crossing or not crossing the line. One time we had an employee steal from us, and in hindsight, was the heart position super, super malicious? No, but it crossed a line, a very clear line. Even though the heart position most likely wasn't like, I'm going to steal from the company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just trust, Yeah.
So let's talk about an employee that doesn't like cross the line, but they continue to cross or come close to the line over and over again. How should managers or leadership or people handle that situation in regards to giving grace?
Coaching.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you need to be telling them, like, you're flirting. Like, you let them know that, like, hey, these are our expectations for the next level that you're trying to go to, and your stuff like this is not going to get you to the next level. So maybe you put them on a PDP.
Yeah, a professional development plan. That's a PDP, different from a PIP, a performance improvement plan. Lots of businesses know what PIPs are. PIPs are like, hey, if you do not change these behaviors in the next 30 days, you will be terminated. That is what a PIP is.
A little bit more intense.
Yeah, a PDP is, hey, these are areas that you need to improve in order to go to the next level. Here at Fit Flavors, we have a 360 review process that we do twice a year. And that 360 review literally gets reviews from various people who work with that individual, whether it's other team members or managers or even employees. And we take that feedback and we might see themes. Like that theme could be, that someone is not giving me a positive reinforcement when I'm working. And multiple people say like, hey, I never hear job well done. Great. In the PDP, we might say, hey, Abby, in order to get to the next level, your team really needs to hear when they're doing a good job. Here's a resource that can help you learn that. Or here, let me give you some one-on-one coaching about that. Or here's some ways that you can positively reinforce your team members so that they feel appreciated by you. And that's like the feedback that you're getting from the PDP. So that's a process that we use here. But the exact question that you asked, that is a management problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very firm on when it is an employee problem or a management problem. If someone's flirting on the line, you either haven't communicated expectations, you do not have written standards and operating procedures, you do not have a firm handbook, and you're not holding other people around that person accountable. Other people are crossing the line and that person's seeing them cross it.
And it almost becomes more normalized.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like she's saying, I think you just, it's more on the manager to have that communication with the employee, because employees sometimes they're not thinking about those things, especially if it hasn't been like, hey, these are our expectations.
How do you talk about grace to a non-faith-based human being?
That's a good question. I think every person in the world, I would think, wants to be loved and accepted and find their place. And when people go to work, they want to be appreciated and they want to be respected and they want to feel like they're adding value to work. I would think that's what people want when they go into the workforce. And so if you are treating people with kind, gentle, what is it?
Loving, gentle, kind. Thanks, Art.
You're loving them, you're gentle with them, you're kind with them, and you're showing them that is you showing them grace every time you're leading them to, the next position or the next opportunity or a course correction. So I think after you are with someone, are you saying how do you have a conversation? With a person?
Teach someone, teach managers what. So I mean, grace is a thing that you feel for me, grace is a thing. I actually saw a reel about this morning. Me and Abby were talking about our doom scrolls that we need to stop doing. But in my doom scroll, I have this on again, off again.
I haven't been getting many DMs with weird shit from you lately.
Oh,
less
really?
doom scrolling.
No.
I took Instagram.
She'll send me cleaning videos and
our algorithms. Actually, our algorithms are pretty similar.
I sent her one the other day about packing up 3 kids in one suitcase in these little compartments.
It was a shoe thing that goes on the back of the door.
Yeah,
and she Sorry to, okay.
Yeah, and you
Anyways,
You guys
Well,
have both lost me.
I'm like, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
You should try that next vacation with your kids. I'm like,
I'm doing it.
I want to do it. I just need one like
You could fit all their stuff into one carry-on that way.
I did.
probably.
Normally I go one suitcase clothes, other suitcase toys, Nintendo, shoes, all that other stuff.
Mm.
I lived in a van for 5 years, and so all of my clothes fit into 2 suitcases that I just traveled with, which was great. I was saying something earlier, and I have no idea what it was, but now I know I need to get a shoe organizer for my next trip, which is a value add on this podcast.
For your next trip?
Yeah, might as well. I mean, now that I don't live in a van, I can buy more clothes and then I can organize them in shoe containers. And you guys are talking about kids, but I'm like, I
Oh
can just do
no,
that for
we
me.
should get her the cubes.
Oh,
Packing
Do you use
cubes.
packing
I do
cubes?
have packing
Yeah,
cubes.
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
they're great.
The packing cubes changed my life.
I love
This
for
is
you.
not an ad for packing cubes, I promise.
You're not. This podcast is not sponsored.
Okay, but I will say, talking to Grace about someone, I think it's easier to have that conversation if you yourself feel like you extend grace. But if this is not resonating with you, that conversation is not going to be easy for you to have.
Heart position is I think the solution. I answered that as I asked it actually. So the word grace means nothing if you don't know Jesus. It doesn't mean nothing, but it doesn't feel the same. Grace feels like a pass or
I think of it.
another opportunity.
That's why I said forgiveness, I think earlier. Because
Yeah.
it's just like you're forgiving someone. You're
Yeah.
letting them to continue on.
I think that if you're
And
speaking
not treating
to
them any different.
if
Not-
you're speaking to a non-faith-based audience, I do think that using the word heart position will get you further.
Yeah,
It
there you
just
go.
says the same thing, but in words that it's like, oh wow, like my heart position was not malicious. My heart position was to do my best, but I didn't, and that's okay.
Have you felt like recently you've had to give grace to anybody at work?
Mm.
She's trying not to look at you, Jillian.
I mean,
That's okay.
no. I mean, no one's ever like. I'm not in a position to where like I don't manage people.
Yeah.
So
Just me.
Just Jillian. But
You have to give, okay, Abby is being very kind. The amount of grace that Abby has to give Jillian and me on a day-to-day basis is extreme, Abby. Like, we'll just change your entire direction of your day in a moment's notice.
I guess that is an example of extending grace. But
Oh.
I don't know. I'm just such a laid back person. Like I'm so like go with the flow.
She
that
is.
It just, I don't know. Like I don't see that as extending grace.
Very
I don't know.
demure, very,
Very
mindful,
mindful.
Oh, wow.
Very cutesy.
very cutesy.
That's another
But-
Instagram
Yeah.
real thing they're talking about right now. I don't really understand.
Because you are not demure.
Jillian is not demure.
All I know is I was told I'm the opposite of that.
No,
yesterday.
you're mindful, but you are
You
the
are
opposite
mindful.
of demure and cutesy. You're the opposite of both of those. But you are mindful.
Cutesy.
You don't know who's cutesy? Your kiddos.
Oh,
Very
thanks.
cutesy.
Very
That's
cutesy.
thanks.
Very mindful.
Not
But-
very mindful. Well, they're getting there. You know.
So, if you were going to leave our listeners with one a bit of advice for them to incorporate a little more grace in the workplace, what would it be?
To incorporate grace in the workplace, you need to draw your line and communicate it clearly. That's it. Grace becomes really easy after you do that. If you don't have policy, procedure, handbook, operating standards,
What if the business you work for doesn't have those things?
create them for your team, create them for yourself, create them for your manager, manage up. I love when someone says to me, Sid, hey, I appreciate you giving me that feedback, but the way that you did it didn't feel good to me. I would like for you to do it different next time. Or, hey, Sid, I realize that you're really busy, but you told me that you would do this thing, and I actually really need you to do it. Can you do it by X date? Manage up. If you don't have it on your team, if your manager knows no lines, like you have 2 options in life: make excuses and go nowhere, or do something about it.
Do something about it or shut the fuck up.
There you go.
That's
Slay.
See, we do curse around here.
Where's your sticker?
That's Art's. That's actually Art's line.
I love it.
He told me that when I first hired him. Yeah,
Mm.
when I started bringing all of my issues to him at the that was 3 years ago.
How many of your issues do you think revolved around the love line? Should we be we need to tell Art about the love line.
jeez. Yeah, we should talk about a lot of them. And he just looked at me, Jillian, and he goes, "You need to do something about it or shut the fuck up." And I was like, "Whoa, I like this guy."
Yeah.
Well, actually, the next episode that will be coming out next week is about feelings and
Well, I don't know if it's coming
emotions.
out next week.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
coming out very soon after this episode really like flows into this episode really well And that is about the opposite, like the differences between feelings or emotions and like expectation. And I also think that episode will help you apply grace in the
Agreed.
workforce. So listen into that one when it's coming down the pipeline.
I'll say too, also, not only extending grace to other employees, but extending grace to yourself in the workplace. Like that's also a good starting place. Like if you're someone that you have very high standards and you find yourself
answering phishing emails,
don't know who did that, but just extending grace to yourself.
Truly.
So
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in today. And as you know, this podcast is sponsored by Fit Flavors. We are a local based company here in St. Louis, 6 locations where you can walk in and get a quick, healthy meal and reheat and eat very quickly. So we're super convenient. And we have all the things for anybody who has any dietary restrictions. So you can always check us out online at www.fit-flavors.com.
And a little like preview, we are launching meal plans. So stay tuned and check out the website for that.
Woohoo!
All right, guys, we will catch you next time.